time to bring everyone together, and that's what we want to be here today. Bring everyone together, bring together this very large, diverse, very geographically distributed community into this nice, beautiful room here, as well as virtually folks are sharing or joining in here on Crowdcast. So again, welcome to our BIDS Town Hall. I wanted to highlight here the amazing team that we have part of the BIDS. We have our BIDS steering group here. We have a couple members, luckily enough, here today in the room we're going to have a lot of time at the end of the session to do a lot of that really beautiful, community engagement, questions that you all have, anything that we can answer, clarify, things like that. We'll have time at the end to go through that. And then we have our BIDS maintainers here that are really, I think, the lifeblood that if you all engage with the BID specification on the GitHub, you probably have engaged with a number of our maintainers. So today I just want to run through what our outline is going to be. So first, I'm going to share just a couple of organizational updates that we want to post here to everybody. Then the bulk of the actual time is we're going to be going through all of our different extension proposals. And luckily enough, we have a number of the leads here today to be able to share live with you some of the exciting progress they've made and things of that sort. Then there's another exciting project coming about called BIDS Connectivity that we're excited to be able to share here today. And then going into a couple community projects that some folks are involved in. And then again, at the very end, this kind of open floor for everyone to talk to us, engage with us, things like that. Which again, back in 2019 was very exciting. And I think it looks like it's gonna be a good one today. So again, starting off with some of our organizational updates here. So for those of us that were kind of following last fall, we had this very exciting BIDS steering group election, which we nominated and inducted RL right over here into the group. And so this year, again, we're going to start having these elections coming more a higher frequency, just to kind of continue to bring new blood into the team and give an opportunity to have more opinions, more perspectives on our, as we call this, the steering group of BIDS. And so these are folks that are helping kind of push forward BIDS and engaging with the maintainers to again continue pushing us forwards into that direction, steering the project. And so just to be clear on that, there'll be more information coming later on summer, exactly what the details of that are. But it looks like we're going to have 2 positions available to be able to join the steering group. And so one thing I wanted to share here, which is, I think, one of the very exciting parts about BIDS, is that living and breathing around the extension proposal. So these are things that help continue to extend BIDS to cover more modalities or go deeper into, say, the derivative space, model space, and some of them the metadata around these around all the data that we work with. And so one thing I wanted to highlight here is that we did recently incorporate into specification microscopy back, I believe, in the winter. So that was really exciting. Some really awesome work there. And so as always, for those of you out here on the crowd that if you're interested in wanting to get more involved in BIDS or like learn more about it, you can always feel free to come talk to me or anybody else that you're going to see on the panel to learn more about it. And so this is a very open, wide-ranging thing. It could be, trying to couple your interests that you have with some of the things on BIDS. And it almost just comes down to just having a conversation with us about what are you interested in. And there's definitely places in BIDS. BIDS is a very large project, as we know. So there's a lot of things that you can contribute into, and we would love to have you part of our maintainers team. And so now I want to kick us off into our extension proposal updates. And so to kind of kick us off here, we're going to have Chris.
All right, thank you. I'm Chris Markevich. I'm lead of a couple BEPs. Some of them I've inherited, and some of them I've kind of been involved in since the beginning. So this is BEP 02. That's a specification for BIDS stats model, or for describing statistical models in BIDS. Last year, around OHBM, we released a 1.0 release candidate and kind of opened up a final round of comments. And the main comment that we got was that it was a little hard to get going with it. It was kind of mixed, the spec and the user guide in a way that didn't really work for anybody who hasn't been like deep in it for years. So this year we've spent a lot of time turning it into a website where we really distinguish these 2 bits. And So there's a pretty comprehensive user guide and getting more comprehensive as we work on it, as well as very specific standards so that people will be able to implement it as needed. And we're also building some tooling around that. So hopefully that's gonna finish up quite soon, and we'll have a 1.0 release and stamp that, and we can move on. Okay. Bet 4, I'm not involved in, and in fact, nobody's involved in. If you are interested in susceptibility-weighted imaging and want to see that in BIDS, please talk to us. And I think it actually wouldn't take a huge amount of work from anybody to get it to the point where you people can start encoding susceptibility-weighted imaging. And the clicker did not do the thing. Okay. Okay, BEP 11. We don't have any points here, but I'm more or less aware of this one. So the structural preprocessing derivatives. So anything that you get out of, so these are derivatives things. So things you get out of FreeSurfer or voxel-based morphometry and things like that are going to be in this. The main holdup here is actually that we are working on a improvement to the BIDS validator that will use a schema that's going to make it easier to write rules for contributors, because right now you have to do this in JavaScript, and the thing we found is there's actually limited JavaScript knowledge in the community. Python, MATLAB, and are much more common, and so we're working to make this more accessible and more sustainable in that way. So once that's done, we've already written a good chunk of the rules for BEP 11, and I think that'll go pretty quickly. We'll have a final round of review. If these are things that interest you, please watch GitHub. Exact same thing for fMRI. And now I'll ask Oscar to come up.
Hi, I'm Oscar Esteban. I worked with the Poldrack Lab, and I've been involved in BIDS for a long while. And some time ago, I took the leadership on these spaces and mappings. Basically, the goal here is to be able to write transformations, spatial transformations as a result of image registration. We held a meeting in MIT in Boston back in 2018, I would say. We set up there some sort of basis for how this BEP would go. And we decided to create some sort of prototype. I started to work on that prototype. We call it night transforms. That little tool is getting more and more mature, but the process is going very slowly. We are about to be able to implement X5, which is the actual file format we envisioned based on HDF5 for these transformations. And once that prototype is working, then this BEP is going to be ready for review, etc. So considering the whole lot of people we have today here, if you are if you want to play with transforms and be part of this BEP, we really need help for this one. So that's it. Thank you.
Hi, Franco Pestilli here, the University of Texas, Austin, and I've been leading with Oscar also and Ariel Rokem, and actually recently Robert Smith from Australia. The Matrix group has been very involved with this, the diffusion with the derivative. It's pretty mature. That we had a big BEP that was involving all the way from diffusion derivatives to tractography. We divided that in 2019. Now we're focusing on the model that described the diffusion in the signal, the signal diffusion within the voxel. And it's very mature, but we have noticed that there's a need for community feedback on principle for inheritance. So there's a pull request there that we will appreciate if you guys can look over and provide feedback. We will try to get them moving, after which the BEP actually is ready for comments. Thank you.
Talk about. You want to talk about that?
All right, I guess I should have stand here. Hi. Okay, so I guess Eugene is not here. So you'll see at the end of the slides, there's a project that I'm co-leading with Russ and Ariel and Oscar. Cyril is involved, and Robert Smith, and there's a bunch of us that are all involved. And we're covering BIDS connectivity. So this is why I'm here again. So there was a generic BIDS connectivity BEP that's 17 that's been around actually for some time and hasn't been making a lot of progress. We had a very good meeting with Eugene last week in preparation to this meeting. We made a proposal to change the generic BIDS connectivity idea to actually BIDS connectivity matrix BEP, a simpler, narrower scope BEP. Looks like some of the team members are saying yes with their no, they're nodding. It's easy, and so we'll be moving that with the summer. Pierre or Herholtz actually will be working with us. I don't know if Pierre is in the room. Hey, Pierre, good. So Pierre will join us. We join the team in the fall, and he brings some young strength to all of us, and we'll make a lot of progress on some of this. Okay, it's not there.
I don't think they're in the room today, so I'll just kind of read off with their exciting progress. But I do know that this particular BEP is getting very, very close to some of the more submission process and actually getting incorporated into BIDS, which I think will be a really good addition to BIDS. So right now they do just have a shared document, and that again, we're very much about this community engagement, and they're looking for folks that if you're interested in eye tracking, gaze position, pupil size, please look out for this BEP, and please comment on it, share your feedback. It's always appreciated. So please. And so yes, and we have some of the leads here listed out, and it's also on the Google Doc as well of how to say contact them if you just want to have a more direct communication with them. And so again, this extension proposal has already gone through a lot of communications with, as we mentioned, the steering group, with our maintainers group. So it's getting very, very close. It's good. They're almost there. They even have examples, and they're online. So that's always great to see them come into life. So again, please, if you're interested in this, engage with them, share your feedback. And then.
Yeah, common electrophysical derivatives. So the main things that we've been working on was the annotation aspect. And so, as you may know, some imaging data needs to be annotated. So one of the big things that seems to work well is we used what typically was used for fMRI with physiology using TSV file, GZ. And that seems to work well in general for continuous annotation. So that's a distinction between annotation on specific events, where pretty much everything that we tried so far can be done with HED. If you don't know HED, we can point to a GitHub repository for this, but that's just a way to mark events, discrete events, versus continuous annotation of a signal, which could be, for instance, an ICA, right? And so you could have something like this, and everything seems to work that way. So we don't. That seems to work. But we welcome any kind of feedback or people trying it and see that it doesn't work for them. We want to see this. The other aspect that we discussed a lot was actually maybe something more general that I wanted to bring here, which is also something that we discussed with Martin for the next BEP, which is the idea of what type of derivatives. So a lot of the work now is creating those derivatives, and one of the questions that Robert Ostenfeld bring to the table was like, well, what's the goal of BIDS, right? The goal of BIDS is to share data, not necessarily to reproduce the intermediate steps. Which means that if you just want to share the final product, you could have, and then Camille is going to talk about provenance, but basically what we want is simply to be able to track where it's coming from and how you generated them. So you don't need to be able to store every single steps of your diffusion imaging, of your EEG, MEG preprocessing. You just have a derived product. And the way, how do you obtain that derived product? So that could be one full type of derivatives, and I think provenance is going to be really good for creating those derivatives. And so I really try to encourage everybody to think about what do we want from derivatives in general? sure, that's my bet here, but like, what do we want to do with derivatives? Do we want to be able to track everything and share all of these intermediate steps, which also means potentially a lot of data to store? For usage, if it's something easy to generate with a filter, why would you want to store this, right? It's useless. You can just recompute it on the fly. So I think there's a lot of thinking to put into what do we want from derivatives, and trying to use provenance and encourage more common derivatives that we merged 2 years ago, but which is quite small now. But I think we could really push on common derivative as much as possible so that we can all have similar tools on the way we handle data without to have to create each time something different. And that's why also that our question is, why do we need intermediate steps, right? So that's like the discussion where we are at, because in EEG, we have like a very long pipeline as well, with many different things we can do on the way, or like, what do we really want to store all of this? So I think it's a very generic question. All right, thanks.
Cool. So yes, again, with this BEP 22, which again is going to be continuing to expand out the modalities that BIDS covers. So this is the magnetic resonance spectroscopy with our leads listed here. And again, this is another one that's getting very, very close. So if you're interested in spectroscopy, then this is the right time to be able to engage with this extension proposal. They've also have met with our steering group, have met with our maintainers group to be able to talk a little bit more about where to get us closer to the submission process, which is being able to engage with the community, go through that review process with us to ensure that it's in that place to be able to incorporate into the specification. Again, we're getting again very close. So please, if you're interested in this, engage with this Google Doc, and then I think it's even in a pull request form. But please, and then.
All right. So my name is Martin Norgard. I'm a part of the Pull Drug Lab, and also part of the efforts of Open Neuro Pet together with Cyril and Melanie. And we have finalized the PET extension for raw data of BIDS. And now we're moving to head the derivatives of PET. And what we've been doing so far is that we've really adopted the common derivative specs as a general approach. But it's also changing across the different fields, both for EEG and fMRI. So we, of course, want to have some sort of provenance, and we'll talk about that later as well. Right now, the BEP 23, it contains all the aspects of PET data analysis, which is both the pre-processing of the PET data. It's also the modeling, so how you go to create these nice neuroreceptor maps that you see a lot out there these days. Right now, as I said, the blood modeling and also pharmacokinetic modeling are currently a part of the draft, but we are thinking about actually splitting this up into multiple BEPs or stages, simply to improve the clarity and also to improve the efforts, because some will be expert in the blood modeling, some will be expert in the pharmacokinetic modeling, and some will be experts in the pre-processing. So instead of trying to fit everything into one, we're thinking of breaking it up. What we're planning on doing next, which is the next immediate step, is to have a joint meeting in the PET community, and everyone who's interested, feel free to join in on this. Simply how to discuss, we'll discuss how to move forward in the best way. Right now, we're also spending a lot of efforts into building pipelines for the community, really stress testing what's needed to go into the derivatives. Because you will have different tracers for PET, you will have different steps. And the question is how for these different tracers that you take all this information and put it into a derivatives form. And one of the reasons why we've not really gone that much forward recently is also the efforts that are going on now with the BIDS validator. So it's going through some major changes these days. And we want to make sure that once we're more or less ready with a draft for the derivatives here, that we can also move easily forward with the BIDS validator and start validating the outputs of the PET processing. Yeah, that's it from me.
Yeah, so yeah, unfortunately our lead is, I don't think, here today with us, but yeah, so this BEP is a little bit in a holding pattern. It's a little bit stuck right now. So the current lead is seeking perhaps a more expert collaborator. So they're more of on the practitioner side of things. So they want to kind of couple up and collaborate with someone more on that technical side. So if you're interested in CT and know that from that technical perspective, we would definitely love your engagement with this extension. And then similar story kind of here. So this extension proposal is still a little bit ongoing. There's some reformulation with it, reconceptualization from some conversations with the steering group. So they're kind of going back, rethinking their extension proposal. But I thought it would still be great to be able to share that here with you all today. And then this one also is a little bit stalled or being merged into different extension proposals. So this one is also another one that's open to new leadership. So if you're interested in microelectrode recordings, definitely please consider taking the torch on this one. Just please come talk to us. Or another one would be engaging with BEP 32 as well. So maybe this would be a nice collaborative effort to be able to cover this.
Can I say things from here? Or do you wanna...
Yeah, it has to be.
Okay, Greg's feeling a little shy, so I'll cover this one. As you can see, we have a lot to tell you about the last year. So just for context, BIDS applications was published as a paper. And so people go and read that. And then if you've talked to anybody at like a high performance computing center, they say that's essentially useless to them. It's it's more of a user guide than it is a spec that can be implemented. So Greg and I, a few years ago, I think in Rome, just started trying to nail down it really as a spec. When you get these inputs, you do this. If this errors in this way, you emit that, so that an automated pipeline system knows how to interpret a program, because programs are extremely heterogeneous. And so it's at this point basically building off of boutiques, which I don't really have time to describe here. But yeah, if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in, the BEP is up. I'd say it's pretty stable. It hasn't moved much.
I'd say the current bottleneck is building a lightweight Python wrapper to make this really easy to use for consumers.
Okay, so, just to repeat what Greg said, because I'm at a mic, the bottleneck is we need a lightweight Python wrapper to make it as easy as possible to use for users.
So someone needs to make that.
So if you would like to make that with your copious free time, please help join us. But otherwise, we consider it fairly stable. You can use it. But until we have implementations, we're not going to really push very hard to try to get it formally in the spec. Sounds good to everybody? Okay. Provenance. Yes, thank you, Camille.
So I'm presenting for the provenance BEP. So this is co-led between Satra Ghosh, who can't be here in person, but is probably online, and myself. So just to go back, following up on the derivatives discussion we had earlier, this BEP is a bit different in that we are trying to have something that is very generic, so that we can handle the many different type of processing that we might apply to the data. So just really quickly, the idea is to be able to write what a processing step is, what are the input, the output, and then to chain processing so that we can reproduce pipelines. And this gives us a way to describe how a data set was obtained. In terms of where the BEP is right now, so we are close to submission. So basically we have the specification in a Google document that is open for comments. And so we have decided that only a subset of that will go into BIDS, which will basically describe where the provenance is going to live. And then we'll have a separate description that will give all the details of how the provenance can be encoded. We are very much looking for feedback and looking for people interested in implementing provenance to try this out. We need to build more examples to test the model and make sure that everything is working properly. And yeah, and I think this is also linking back, as I was saying, to what Cyril was discussing earlier. So since there are many BEP leads here, and in particular the BEP leads from derivatives, please reach out so that we can discuss. And that's it. Thank you.
Cool. So I don't think our leads are here today. Cool. So yeah, so just to give an update on the virtual and physical motion extension proposal. So just some notes here. So there's no nesting of tracking systems anymore. And luckily there are example data sets and a validator implementation of this extension proposal already online for anyone that, if you're interested in looking at, is there readily available. So it's always exciting to see them come into life. So one open discussion point that, again, if you're interested in this type of virtual and physical motion data, just matching between the events.tsv and the actual specific tracking system files. So it sounds like this is a very ongoing discussion. So please, if you're interested in that, engage with that discussion and share your thoughts. And again, this one's also, so as you're starting to see, there's a common thread that there's a lot of really exciting things that are going to be coming to BIDS in a very short amount of time. So this is another one that's getting very, very close to submission that I think they've engaged, again, both of our steering group and our maintainers group. And we're going to be starting to get them also close to a community review. So again, this is, I think, really a beautiful time to come into BIDS. If you aren't really familiar, there's going to be a lot of extension proposals coming online, different community review feedbacks to be able to share your opinion with us, with the community, to help, because it really makes BIDS stronger for everyone to be able to use. And so then we have FNIRS, or NIRS, the near infrared spectroscopy. And so this common thread, this one's also getting very, very close to being submitted and going through the submission process in BIDS. They also have the validator extension that we talk about there. They have examples up online, and that they've actually already written up a manuscript, and it's been reviewed by half of their contributors. So things are getting very, very close to getting complete on that extension proposal as well. So I'm not sure if BEP 32 is in the room today. But one thing I think perhaps to mention here is to take a look at their Google Doc probably. And so everything that we're actually talking about today can be found on our website under the Get Involved tab. And so that's where you can find all these different specifications that we're talking about today. What are our colleagues actually trying to propose to include? And then advanced DWI, yes, is not here either. And so this one's moving along well. And so it does intend to integrate data between these kind of high and low field MR scanners within diffusion. And then they're trying to go to, I think, to more like advanced sequences as well. And that they're looking to standardize, I guess, with Charmed and Excalibur, I think, which will be exciting. And that there is an example data set that will come showing this. And that there's going to be another software prototype for all the kind of binary data payloads using HDF5, and that's also under development. So I think we also have computational modeling as well. So this one started off with like a original pull request. Then they engaged with both our, I think, steering group and maintainers group to kind of rethink it, understand how to do better at it. And so now they have a second pull request that we can kind of see here. It covers more networks, time series, coordinates. And so that's we're still going under the more kind of general community, taking a look at, commenting on, as well as, let's say, another maintainer being able to take a look at. And luckily, there was a importer written for the virtual brain, which will be added in the next release. So I think that'll be great to see. Again, these more examples, so we can see it really come into life.
My name is Tamás Pizak from the University Hospital Essen. And in this BEP, basically we aim to to extend bits so that we can store and even harmonize data from multiple independent data sets or independent studies, basically, as it's needed for individual participant level mega-analysis. Now we have revised the previous proposal draft, and now it has a modular format so that the modules can be reviewed more or less independently, and thereby reducing a little bit the workload on the reviewers. So basically, in the first module, we describe our very simplistic and straightforward concept for a top-level directory, which basically stores the data of the independent studies. And then in the second module, we describe a way to map metadata to files, extra metadata to different files. This can be very handy for non-compliant derivative folders, like a free surfer output folder, just for instance. And module C builds on synergies of these two previous modules. And as a result of this synergy, it allows the non-invasive harmonization of all the datasets, which means that the actual datasets remain untouched, and all the information metadata about which needs to be harmonized resides at the top level. The proposal is reviewer-friendly also because of its two parts. So it has a short and very example-driven summary of all modules, and then we also have the detailed formal specification. We are right now preparing 3 example datasets. 2 of them are already openly available. Also harmonizing it to other BEPs. And basically what we need right now is more community feedback, basically in 2 main directions. One is that we would like to identify new use cases which can somehow challenge the current proposal. That would be a good thing to find something we can't cover yet. And the other direction is to agree upon the small details of the actual formal specification we are proposing. Thank you.
Cool, so I think...
Hi, Franco Pestilli here again, and I'm discussing a project, and I want to make a comment here. If you look around this room, there's a lot of people, right? And we were commenting how in 2019, in the last human brain mapping, probably a quarter of this, so maybe like a third, right? So as you see, the project is growing well and is growing with a lot of interest. So thanks to Russ and to Chris, that everything started, and now that's great, right? That's great. And what you've seen so far is that the majority of the project, the BIDS project, has actually grown, what I would say, horizontally. Okay? Many BEPs have been added, different modality, different types of data, and that's great and that's necessary. So, but to this point, we actually do not have a BIDS standard that can take raw data to publish papers. There's efforts that are needed to conclude the BEPs that are open, add, expand, but also there's effort that are needed to actually move the standard closer to publication, because one of the goals of the standard is to support reproducibility, and to do that, we need to get to describe data that are actually in the papers. Now, with that idea in mind, in 2019, we wrote a grant to actually focus on brain connectivity, generally the connectivity. We were lucky, we got funded, and we started a little bit in delay because of the pandemic, and we just hired a peer that will be starting this summer. We've been doing some work, and this is what the BIDS Connectivity Project is. It's a project that is meant to cover different data modalities and do a little push for each one of that modality related to connectivity data, and that means diffusion, so structural connectome, fMRI, so functional connectomes, but we also plan to cover EEG, maybe EEG and intracranial. Let's see how far we can go. Okay, so we actually put the grant online on the Open Science Framework. So there's a link there that you can get to, and also So we're organizing a workshop in September for Franklin and Sandra. That really this is all nailing down. That the week of the 12th of September we'll be meeting in Austin in person, and we'll try to kickstart the project. There's been activity, as you've seen on the previous slides, and but really we feel like in our mind September is going to be the date of really working on this seriously. The last thing, so we please welcome you're welcome to engage with us. Contact me, contact Franklin for a couple of more days and weeks, and then we'll work on this. And it's an important project, a project that we have a lot of passion for, and we want to make a good progress. It's going to be challenging. One comment at the end before I leave is that we also, as part of this project, Ariel, Francois, Renaud, and others are pushing the idea that we probably need a standard for tractography files, and that is key when we started approaching the diffusion related derivatives. We didn't know what to do, like how many file formats are we supposed to every toolbox has their own file format. It's almost one-to-one match, right? So there's a strong push. Please reach out to your folks that you know at your institution that are working on tractography and might have software that write the data out for tractography in their own. There's a poster. And brain connectivity projects, please reach out to us. We think it's important.
Cool. Okay. So I think we just have one more slide here before we're going to break out into the kind of the more open question and answer type of session here. But I just wanted to spotlight a couple really exciting community projects that are ongoing. And again, I think a common thing we're seeing here today is to please engage with us. We love the feedback. That's how BIDS has gone to this point, is through the community, and it will only advance because of how strong the community is. So one here is our BIDS starter kit. So that's very vital for some of our new members coming on board, trying to learn how do you actually bring BIDS to life? How do I actually make this data set BIDS? And so this starter kit helps do that. And so the project's moving from a more kind of GitHub-based interface into an actual kind of website that I think a lot more folks are more familiar with navigating on. And we started up a YouTube channel as well that has some videos there of starting to kind of walk folks through of getting your data set into BIDS. And that's being primarily led by Remy. And then we have BIDS MATLAB as well, which is also being led by Remy, which I think is getting close to candidate release or is already there. But that's also a really exciting thing to be able to continue extending BIDS and be able to support our MATLAB colleagues. And so I think we're going to actually shift into this kind of more community feedback portion. So I'm going to invite up our maintainer, Chris, and then our steering group members, Ariel and Russ. So then if anybody has questions, please feel free to ask them. We're just going to kind of take a moment to migrate over to this space.
While we're getting settled, a lot of you have interacted with Franklin, who's really been kind of the lead on making everything happen in BIDS over the last, almost 5 years. Yeah. Franklin is moving on to the next chapter of his life soon to go to graduate school. And so we'll be moving to a new chapter in BIDS as well. But I'd like to have us all thank him for everything he's done over all the time he's been involved in the project.
I guess. I don't know, don't be shy. We'll be fine.
So if there are questions online, how are we going to know that? Is somebody reading them off? Or should we pull something up on our phones?
I guess we can go ask. I think.
Oh, I see a question.
Where should I speak?
Shout, we'll say it into a mic. Okay, sure, why not?
So I want to ask an intentionally provocative question, and I wasn't planning to be the first question, but everyone seems quiet, and I hope maybe a provocative question will bring more people forward. As way of background, I have been very, very peripherally involved in BIDS from the beginning. And I've kind of watched it, but I consider myself an outsider. I've just, one of the posters I'm presenting here is the first poster that from data collection on, my data is almost to bid spec on the, off the scanner, but not derivatives. And I see the immense work that so many people have put into this and all the really smart, really hardworking people. And sometimes it seems that the effort is so much focused on what's the precise file name, what's the precise key, that it's really smart people spending a lot of time on these really minute questions. And I see how hard it is even with like the original data. And I feel like when we're going to derivatives and other stuff, it's effectively an unsolvable problem if you keep moving in this direction. And I feel like the derivatives are going to be like, there's going to be one package, whatever the derivatives are decided, there's going to be one package that can handle it. So like, maybe fMRI, PrefMRI, but like having that something consistent enough, but also flexible enough that many packages can handle many things. It feels like the amount of time devoted into these keys and file namings is just going to sink you. And I wonder how much it's worth taking a step back and saying, we need a common language. The file names and the keys are what get us started, but more of this effort, if more of this effort was on parsers or interpreters, so like, hypothetically, if FSL or AFNI said, here is, these are our file names, here's the parser, then you wouldn't care what you name the motion files or the registration files, as long as there's a parser to do that. And then you're not asking every other package to sort of redo everything to your spec. You're saying, we're going to give you the tools so that whatever you do it, there's other ways to do it. And that would honestly let it expand more. And I know that's hard work, but I'm just looking how much time I had a minor change. I said almost to spec for the data set I'm doing, because I did something, a little bit out of spec, and I opened an issue that Chris was back and forth, and it was 19 comments back and forth on this really minor change to information on, raw data off the scanner, and it's still sitting open. And that's just probably a fraction amount of time you spend on all these issues on these really minor things. And I really wonder if that's the best way for a lot of people to spend time. And I'm sure that one will get resolved, but it's just an immense amount of time for these little things that I think are getting a little bit away from the goal of BIDS, of making it easier to share across packages, across stuff. So like I said, provocative. I didn't intend to be the first question, but maybe this will encourage more people to speak up too, so I'll stick my neck out.
Do you want to have a first pass?
I can. Just to make sure, are people hearing this online? Is there anybody? Okay, great. Yes, I agree. Derivatives is a completely nightmarish space, and it cannot ever be done fully. And so I think the important thing is to focus on what are the derivatives that are going to be reused in a further pipeline. And when multiple tools find they're trying to use the same inputs, but from different places, that's a good place to start saying, let's merge these things. And trying to have a all-encompassing standard is just not going to work. And I think you're right. I think also to your point about wouldn't it be nice to have like a mapping file that says, okay, FSL, just describe what your derivatives are and use these keys that are related to BIDS to find them. There was originally, I want to say it was like that 15 or something that just kind of disappeared, this exact goal. And I think what happened was the person who did it solved the problem for his lab and was just like, it's not worth doing it, but we should dig that up. And the other thing is, I think there was exactly the same thing proposed in BEP 35 that we heard earlier. So more people have been thinking about this exact problem and the problem of, we can't make everybody conform. And how do we work with that as well? So I think it's a point very well taken, and we should respond to it. Real? Okay. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm from BEP 35, so I thought that I should also add something. And so for our BEP, so for mega analysis at the individual participant level, basically all of the derivatives can be considered as input for another pipeline, because that's what mega analysis are about, especially if we are working on the derivative level. On the other hand, this so regarding mapping derivatives, I think that I hope that we can initiate a community conversation about this, because I also find the question interesting, especially that it can kind of hijack efforts of transforming derivatives into proper bits, because you can just just create a mapper for your file or for your software, but that can actually be also a good thing. So I'm not sure, we should just discuss it. This is just my remark to all of these. And another aspect which is slightly related to this, and I was often wondering about, and maybe also all the other BEP leads are also facing this question, that there is definitely a compromise we must make between being very specific in the proposal, but still maintaining human readability. So keeping it simple enough so that people will actually take the effort of reading the proposal and implementing that in their work. So I was just wondering about if you have any specific strategy for that, or how should we proceed with that? I could say a lot of specific examples, but now it's maybe worth to try to think about the generic question a little bit.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll respond. Now I'm trying to remember what the question was. Hold on.
Well, I think getting at the kind of readability issue, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, this was definitely a problem that we had with BEP02, was just trying to find that balance between something specific enough to implement and readable enough to want to use. And I mean, our approach has been to basically do both things, which is more work. But I think, I mean, yeah, I guess I mean, I'm also a part of BEPs that have been open for 5 years. So I don't know that my suggestions are going to lead you down a short and easy path.
Yeah, I think a strategy that seems to be common across several BEPs is to try to do incremental steps towards inclusion in the spec, rather than try to bite off a lot at a time, right? These very big principled, like large projects, instead of doing small incremental things is easier to understand, easier to review, easier to include, I think.
Yeah, that's also why we ended up with the modular structure, to be
Yeah,
able to
100%.
to work in little pieces. That was actually suggested by Remy, but I found it a very good idea. And also, I think that basically the fact that we have a validator allows us to go to be also very, very specific about the details. But maybe the actual specification could have a level which is still very short, a short summary. And after reading that, someone already has the idea how to transform the files, and then the validator tells if it was good or not. Basically, that's my idea. And that's what we also try to basically follow in the proposal structure. So we have this very short example-driven summaries for the normal people, and then there is also the very detailed specification, which is at some points it's almost like a little bit of algorithmic way of thinking, which is not that accessible for all users. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I guess I would also just throw in, like, what you're describing is pretty much why the BIDS starter kit exists. It's to give people that more user-friendly introduction. So you get used to the ideas, and then you need to go look up a specific key, and you go to the standard. We're definitely running into issues where the website and the multiple GitHub repositories are a little bit fractured, and people are having a hard time finding what they need, because we do have a large set of examples that you can go and browse. But it's not clear that everybody's finding them easily. And so we are thinking about how to better organize that. And if anybody's really good at web design or user experience, that's a place where we could, use additional help.
probably related to previous questions, but to be honest, I'm having trouble formulating it as a question. So I've been working a bit in the derivative space, and what I'm finding is that this philosophy of just having file names and entities and key values kind of doesn't quite satisfy the complexity of certain types of derivatives. And there are multiple possible solutions to that. And it's possible that with having multiple derivative BEPs coming in parallel, that we might just end up with this kind of massive merge conflict where we've got a bunch of different philosophies that are context specific. Have the maintainers thought at all about trying to plan ahead with a common philosophy for derivatives that would then be applicable across the board?
No, but we should. Well, so yes, provenance as a language of describing a derivative, that's the BIDS prov thing, but that's a bit separate from the question of the philosophy of what should a derivative look like. So when diffusion merges their derivatives, what is functional merges their derivatives? Are they at a comparable scale, or is, say, diffusion extremely specified in the JSON metadata, while functional is just like, we like time series, we'll give you a nice TSV file, and which I think is actually how it has worked out. And so, yeah, we should get together and do this. I mean, I don't think everything has to be exactly, going in the exact same direction, as long as there's not causing conflicts. And yeah, so we haven't had like a specific derivative, like pan derivatives meeting in a few years, and maybe we ought to.
I do think the BIDS connectivity project might kind of take that mantle to some extent.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Not exhaustive.
Right.
Hi there. Could you say something about the governance of BIDS and how it's been working, where the challenges are, where there's scope for improvement and community management, that kind of thing?
I guess I could start speaking to that. I mean, I think in general, the steering group model, I think, has worked pretty well. We spend a lot of time, talking to people, in the community who have particular projects at various sort of levels. And I think we've been pretty, we try to give a lot of feedback, but haven't actually been as directive as I would have been in some cases. But I think the idea is it's a community organization, and so we want to help steer rather than saying yes, we're going to do this, no, we're going to do this. I'm interested to hear how people feel about how the steering has gone. I think like I'm going to be rotating off of the group, later this year. I think we have new blood. Ariel just joined. We'll have more new blood later in the year. I feel pretty good about the model that we have in place. I'm interested to hear if you have thoughts about, if your question was spurred by a particular shortcoming that you see in the governance.
Nothing as yet.
Okay. Cool.
I'm just curious. Like I know, so from all the BEPs, we're hearing a lot of, we need community feedback. We'd like community feedback. Like what's the model for, like, I agree, like actually going out and finding people is often more effective than saying, please, can someone feedback? And the kind of the death by community risk and whether you're experiencing that and whether that's something you want to address.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Others may have something to say about that. Certainly we're seeing that some things are moving along much better than others. And that's, I think we've kind of left it up to the community to see like who's going to be really engaged. We're going to kind of, put the most attention behind the things where people, are sort of working the hardest. But you're right that it's easy for diffusion of responsibility to happen and for things to kind of fall by the wayside. And I think we haven't gotten too upset about that just because we realize that anytime people are volunteering to do work, some things are going to kind of go better than others. But no, I think I'm pretty happy with how things have ended up in general.
That's great. Great, thank you.
Yeah. I would just add that I kind of have a philosophy of not everything needs to be BIDS. If there isn't momentum to push something, that's okay.
Hi. So I, and I'm sure others in this room, tend to work with large data sets. And usually in the first step of a processing pipeline with some of the prep software is that a big database file is made. And for these large data sets, it can take very large amounts of time, even though these you might only be running a job on a single subject. So something that I've been doing as a workaround is making little kind of mini BIDS directories that are just single subject. I'm wondering from a BIDS perspective, do you think, or maybe like the BIDS provenance perspective, do you think this is something that's valid? Do you think, are there any other possibility that you can think of to address in the future for more efficiently processing large data sets in these kind of participant-specific ways?
We need to refactor PyBids, and Erdal, I can't remember his last name, at Oldenburg, has put in a pull request to replace the SQL database with this custom pure Python module, and it is like 3 or 4 orders of magnitude faster. So I would encourage you to test that and help us get it to where we can merge it, and suddenly everybody's tools will go much, much faster.
Got it.
And this is also an issue where I think the microscopy BEP is going to help push things because, those data files are substantially larger.
So the guy's name, just make sure he gets the amazing credit he deserves. His name is Erdal Karaka.
Erdal Karaka, Greg tells us, is his full name.
The development really is amazing. It'll be merged soon, at least in like a development branch of PyBids.
Yeah, and it's in a development branch of PyBids. It is something you can go test. It does not currently pass all tests, which is why it isn't merged yet, but it should be at least moderately usable already.
Got it. Thank you. I guess on a related point, are there any efforts that are being made from the BID side to curate any publicly available data sets, or is that burden kind of being left to the people who make those data sets?
Yeah, BIDS is not trying to track who's using BIDS at this point.
Got it. Good. Thanks.
Sorry, but I'll just add, we've certainly pushed people who were involved in various projects to move to BIDS. So for example, there's this ABCD community release where Damien Fair's group, moved the data into BIDS. And I don't know if anybody's done it for Human Connectome Project, but certainly, we're engaged with the Healthy Brain Cognitive Child Development Project now. So we certainly do our best to try to push, large, high-value data sets to use BIDS, but ultimately, we only have so much leverage.
Got it. Thanks.
We should note, actually, hold on. We should note, I see comments on the screen. I don't know if there are any questions that we should be reading out instead of giving priority to all.
It all looks like technical stuff.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Go ahead, Oscar.
So I'm going to bring Daniel's question and try to reformulate it in a different way. I think the problem Daniel brought up is many people reach out to the BIDS specification, GitHub, etc. You spend a lot of time, and then the credit for the people who are contributing their time is really difficult to give, right? So if you're developing a big BEP, there's the promise that you will have a paper, and that will contribute to your future and career, and you will really stay there as a contributor. But if you have a very small contributing effort, but you spend a lot of time trying to convince someone else that something should be done in a different way, that kind of diffuses. So I think as a community, we should think about ways of crediting these small contributions and to make it easier for people to participate. Because I think that's more the problem. It's not like there's any value in trying to specify everything. I think there is. The problem is the cost you incur in doing it is at the moment maybe too big for some people. I don't know, what is your thoughts about that?
I mean, I think credit in general is a hard problem, right? And a lot of people are struggling. I'm part of this group in the US called Helios, which is trying to figure out in general, how can universities give people credit for, activities that we want them to be engaged in, like open science activities, data sharing, and stuff like that. So it's not just this project where that's a challenge. I mean, and I know you can say a bit more about the kind of the credit mechanisms that are in place. I understand that they might not be balanced with the work that people have to put in. But all that's to say, it's a hard problem in general.
I wanted to add also, this was said before, but I'll just reinforce that this call to join the maintainers group is still there.
Yep.
In particular, if you're looking at the maintainers group and you don't see people with your background who are like you and so on, please do consider joining the maintainers group. And one way you can think about the payoff of that is in the things that you might learn from that group. Being involved with that group is a way to learn a lot of things. These are very technically proficient, really highly experienced people who are also at the same time really welcoming and friendly. That's not necessarily a very highly populated part of the Venn diagram. So that's a real opportunity. So that's one way to think about the payoffs, is not necessarily in the clear incentive structure, but rather in the opportunity to learn things from participation in this kind of thing.
Yeah, I realize there's a little chicken and egg thing here. He's like, please come contribute and help us credit people better, but we don't have a way of crediting that to start. But I mean, it's definitely not a thing that I'm extremely familiar with how to do well. And so I would very much welcome somebody who does have strong ideas about this, would help credit people for doing contributions like mine or other people's. Great, that'd be lovely.
Before I go, I just want to point out that there's a question in the chat now from Christine Rogers. Do you see that?
Cool. I can read it out loud. For groups who are producing BIDS, open data sets, and open converter tools, and engaging with the BEP spec for derivatives, how can the BIDS governance structure help support these efforts? I mean, I think that you can speak to this as well. I mean, the steering group is always happy to have people come talk to us about their ideas at whatever stage of that. And in general, the earlier the better, right? The earlier we can give feedback, and then and we're happy to continue talking as things go along. And then to the degree that the maintainers are also part of that governance, they're very happy to work with people at any stage.
I might also say that if you are finding that the maintainers feel exclusive and not welcoming, please talk to the steering group about it, because that's one of their jobs, is to make sure that we're doing our jobs and we're helping the community, not actually becoming a bottleneck or driving people away.
Yeah, no, I'll just add about the role of this steering group. And steering is that part of the role is to also help with the kinds of problems that Rob mentioned before, of coordination across different BEPs. To be able to say, look, there is another group over here that is thinking about similar things that you're thinking about. Maybe you should also coordinate with them. And that happens quite often in conversations that we have with BEP leads and with other members of the community.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sebastian from Montreal, and I actually have a question along these lines. So we're working on a project for harmonizing phenotypic metadata across data sets so we can search across them whether they live on the same machine or not. And I know there's been some work in the field around these. I think what we're trying to do is very, very simplistic for now, and then just trying to go for a very concrete use case of a cohort search. But it's a little bit a question relating to what Chris and Cyril said, that one of the points of BIDS is making it easy to share data. And another thing is not everything has to be BIDS. And so I think one of the things that isn't quite BIDS in that sense is spec for the phenotypic data, right? And I think that's on purpose. So my question is, how should we coordinate something like this? And what I mean is, if we do find a minimalistic description for harmonized data that could be BIDS compliant, what is the best way of organizing that and making sure that it works with BIDS without overloading BIDS itself?
I mean, certainly we've been thinking about, I think the stats models project has really driven us to think about the degree to which we want there to be things that are kind of BIDS relevant, kind of a penumbra of projects that aren't going to be, I mean, for me, what it means to be in BIDS is to be in the validator ultimately, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's going to be a lot of stuff that we don't necessarily want to put into the validator, or at least if we put in a very, we'll have it know that models that JSON models something, start a JSON is part of that specification, but it won't be validating what's in that JSON file. And so I think that, so that is to say, we're very open to and supportive of things that live in that penumbra. But we also want to be as supportive as we can of those things. And so I think that for something like that, I mean, you can tell me if you think I'm wrong. I think that talking to the maintainers to figure out, kind of, does this seem like something that should really, or talking to the steering group, does it seem like something that should ultimately go into the validator, or should it be something that's kind of BIDS relevant that we will, we can herald on the website and kind of make clear that it's something we support, even if it isn't part of the validator?
Yeah, I basically agree with that. The one thing I would just kind of add into that is, like, you might get the sense here, adding things into BIDS can be slow, and sometimes, and you then need to worry about things like getting it right the first time, because BIDS has backwards compatibility built in. Trying to figure out where to draw a line of, like, this is where the data lives, but the spec of, or how exactly the data looks, is going to be somewhere else. And that's what we did with, we're doing with BEP2. That's what I'm encouraging community to do with BIDS Prov. And if your proposal can fit into that direction, I think you're going to have a lot more flexibility and probably be able to move forward more quickly. I think some of the reason people try to do BEPs is because they see this community and they're like, I want to get input from all these people. This seems like a great place to get feedback. And sometimes that works, and sometimes it seems to backfire a bit because you're niche enough that people are aware of you and like, good, I'm glad it's happening, but you're not actually reaching the people who could give you really substantive feedback.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
So I think I made a comment before that it was subtle, but actually it's really important. One of the things I think we've learned so far with many of the derivatives BEPs is that they need to be broken down into smaller modular steps. That's actually, it's an important accomplishment that we've done through BIDS, because they were these monumental BEPs and they were really hard, at least for me, I have a small brain, okay? And this has implication for a lot of aspects of what we're discussing. One of all, it's an implication for the contribution model, right? So the smaller the BEPs, the easier it is to contribute, the more likely someone, I believe, would be able to comment on it. I think so. We should push that. So if you are working on a BEP and you are trying to get more to the BEP, maybe thinking about less is more. It's a good model, right? The other thing, which is actually the open question here, the question here is, does this have implication for the way we're going to write BIDS compliant software for processing? Okay, so several of us in the room here have been writing software that do analysis end to end, fMRI prep, ASL prep, and I think more are coming. Okay? And these are monumental, long efforts that actually generate intermediate derivatives that soon we'll have BEPs for, right? And when we started the Brain Life project, we actually started working on a model that had small steps and modular steps that communicate, where apps and the outputs of apps communicate to each one of the steps. I wonder whether you guys are thinking and seeing that maybe some refactoring of what we have been doing with the processing of the data and the code, the software that processes the data is going to have to happen, given what we learn and given the way we can contribute and support the BEPs, the BIDS and the software associated. So are we going to have to break down the long pipelines?
I think, I mean, a pipeline needs to produce something useful. So, a pipeline that takes, I don't know, some fMRI data and does brain extraction and leaves it at that might not be so useful to a broad base of users exactly. I think it's fair to say that a lot of these are built in a modular way, right? But, the modularity is internal to the software and it exposes an API or something that users can run end to end. I'm not sure if that answers your question directly.
But the idea that intermediate steps are accessible as an object,
right, of processing. It's not quite built into some of the pipelines that are out there. This has made actually some of you guys work really hard to help work with us because there were things changing in the middle of the pipeline that weren't compliant and were helpful and took a long time to be addressed. I think there's value in thinking that even though the intermediate steps are not helpful for the wider community, they are sustainable in terms of engagement and development. And yes, and then maybe the pipeline will have an end-to-end, wrapper or something. But there's value in clarifying the steps in a BIDS compliant way.
I mean, I agree with that in general, but I do think, we've always had this philosophy of BIDS of like, the 80-20 rule, right? Of not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I agree that the perfect is to have every step specified in a way that anybody could plug in and reuse anything in any step. But if that's going to block people from actually building pipelines that put out, the derivatives at the end being BIDS compliant, then I wouldn't want that goal, that ultimate perfect goal, to get in the way of people doing stuff that can get us most of the way there.
Hi guys, thank you for this informative session. So I'm Jack Van Horn. I am one of the co-chairs of the OHBM's Best Practice Committee, along with Peter Bandettini, and we're often very interested in identifying things that are best practice, or dare I say the word standards, because it's kind of loaded. Some of this discussion is actually exactly in the sweet spot of what the Best Practices Committee is interested in. We don't want these things which are so microscopically specified that it actually crushes innovation. Really, we want to find what's best practice, what can people in the OHBM community be utilizing, and it still kind of helps them to share data, promotes like consistency in workflow, provenance, et cetera, but leaves that room for people to really innovate in the space of the derivatives in this case, or other things. So we're not, over specifying things and leaving a lot of room. I was also curious though, is the BIDS leadership, the steering committee, interested in promoting BIDS as an OHBM standard? And if you are, I would encourage you to think about what are those elements which are rock solid enough that they could actually form the basis of a best practices recommendation. And this might be a great way to get community buy-in. There's all the people who are not in this room, but are downstairs and elsewhere who would be users of this. And it may really engage more community involvement. Just any thoughts on that you have would be wonderful.
I guess a slightly provocative thought would be that if it's in the standard, we think it's good enough to be part of the best practice. So I would say we have something that we can give you as a best practice document. It's called the BID standard.
Yeah,
right?
I'm just wondering if you're ready to take that step. It sounds like it's low hanging, and that
and we have a validator that can tell you whether you're meeting the standard or not, right? And people can argue about whether it's the right thing or not. But that would be my philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, because it sounds like you are 90% of the way. It just needs to take that next step, and then the Best Practices Committee has a little process they go through, but some of you are involved in that process, probably know of it, and certainly it's the kind of thing that OHBM wants to see and could certainly be supportive. You've got a whole community who uses neuroimaging, and this would be a great way to engage them and give you, that little stamp of approval that OHBM, is supportive and approves of this.
I mean, I think we should invite, some representatives of your committee to come to one of the steering group
Gosh, that'd be nice.
meetings and talk through what it would take to get us over the hill.
OHBM is very serious about it because they want to see the best science being put forward. And so if this is one way to help encourage that and support it, then please do feel free to reach out to us, and I'll be reaching out to you guys as well.
Cool.
Thank you.
I'll read a question from Satra in the chat. Is there a roadmap for considering the issues that break backwards compatibility that got punted to BIDS 2.0, given resource constraints? I'm not sure how much attention is paid to those issues. I was actually going to raise something else about breaking changes in backward compatibility. You're probably the best person to speak to this.
I guess I see the BIDS 2.0 wish list as a big list of nice to haves that will make things more consistent or allow you to do some things that are not possible right now. But I think the resource constraint is a big thing, and people put a lot of effort into making things BIDS. If we want to do that, we are going to need a very, very clear path to help, like just a tool to help people migrate. You have a BIDS 1 data set, here it is now BIDS 2. If we can't do that, we are just going to fracture. Like every tool that supports BIDS 1 is now going to have to be like, or it's going to have to support 2 entirely different input formats. That's going to be really difficult, so I see it as something that is kind of in practice, like unlikely to happen within the next few years.
I mean, it does seem like I was hoping maybe you could just say a tiny bit. I don't want to keep Camille from asking her question, but say a tiny bit about the development on the validator, because it seems like a schematized validator would make it much easier to say, I want to use validating as version 1.0 versus 2.0. Right?
Yeah. So I mean, that could definitely be a way forward. So the validator, we're trying to write a schema where every rule in BIDS has some kind of declarative representation that's fairly easy to read as a human, but extremely clear to a computer. And as long as there are some things that can only be encoded in software, you can't just do it declarative, like the inheritance principle. One of the big problems with BIDS 2.0 is it has both the suggestion that we should make the inheritance principle more broad and we should abolish the inheritance principle. So there are some fights to be had. But if we get to a fully schematized version, then those fights can be had and the winner can make a new schema. Yeah.
So I don't have a really well-formulated questions. It's a bit of ideas, but I'd like to echo a little bit the comment that was made by Cass about community. And I think there is some room for us to think critically about who engage in the BIDS community. I'm thinking at all levels, like we are asking community for feedback, but also maybe we should think about who are BEPS leads right now. How did they get there? We, like on BIDS Prof, we've been lucky to have people from the Clinica team who join us, so Omar, Ghislain, Mathieu. We also have people from the PIDRA group. I'm thinking Dorota, Ryan, who are here and can give like some of their effort. But in general, like I think it would be interesting to reflect on which BEPS are doing well. Are there best practice we can share? I remember, so I've been in BIDS for quite a while. In the old days, we used to all meet for 3 days and work on a BEP. I don't think we would want that now because we have other issues in mind, such as sustainability. But still, I have this feeling like we lack time where we are all together to focus on that thing. And this means that we can find people who have the time, who can do that because of their role. So it's a bit of a mess, but I think it's important that we reflect together who we are representing in the community. And there was no question, so.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't
Same
have
here.
anything
Yeah.
more formulated to respond with.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we do need to.
I guess the question is, what does that reflection look like? You know, how does that reflection actually happen, and what does it look like?
Yeah, maybe it's like, how do we get more intentional about this? Like, if this is an issue we know, then maybe we should, maybe start by looking who is actively contributing and understanding how and why and what we can do to make that happen. I don't know.
So like user research for the BEP developers as opposed to user research for the BIDS users to figure out like what the process is like for BEP leads.
And it might be a continuum, like if we,
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Firstly, regarding the inheritance principle, sorry, not sorry. Secondly, follow up to Franco's question and Ariel's response regarding smaller processing steps and keeping track of those. There seems to be an implicit assumption within the BIDS apps ecosystem that they are intended to be endpoint to endpoint. You go from raw data, you perform literally all of your processing in a single step. Personally, I'm a big fan of modularity, and I've been exploring the idea of having smaller discrete BIDS apps that perform only a subset of a processing pipeline and then connect together in an intelligent way. To what extent has that prospect been explored in BIDS Provenance, BIDS Apps 2, and probably just BIDS philosophy overall?
I'm guessing I'm probably the was qualified to respond to that one. I think the fact that you're saying that that's something you want to do is probably the first time I've heard somebody. Well, no, I think second, but the other person went to like a real extreme. Is like every single app like Bet should, take in a BIDS data set and emit a BIDS data set. It's a single file. If this is actually a useful modular way to write things, I think that's a reasonable way to do it. From the perspective of a user, as opposed to a developer, like it seemed like, at least with fMRI prep, it made sense to say, okay, what are the things that you more or less just need to say, yes, get the pre-processing done, and then I'll make all the rest of my decisions. And that's where we went with. No, not too many people want to say, okay, I want to like switch out this and that, and I want to have a full set of data sets that track like how I got to where I'm going to. And so I think that's just been like a historical like estimation of what people wanted and what the people who were writing the tools wanted to do. And that's driven where BIDS has gone. I don't think it's currently preventing you from writing what you want to write, but and I don't think BIDS apps or BIDS execution should be getting in your way, but there are certainly not going to be many examples that would guide you. I don't know if you disagree or agree with that.
Neither way, really. It's just something that I've been considering and concerned as to whether there's been some higher level decision that I'm not aware of that has set the precedent one way or the other.
I don't think this has been set by BIDS. This has been set by what people want to do with BIDS. So there's no top level, high level demand that you behave in a specific way here.
Our high level demand is that we address the use cases that people bring to us, basically. So if you have use cases that can't be addressed right now, then we want to work with you to make sure that we can, make those work. And the use cases have, largely been things like fMRI prep that are end to end, but that doesn't mean that that's where we think things need to be necessarily.
Yeah, I guess fMRI prep has tried to work like with BIDS. It has not tried to tell BIDS where to go. Yeah.
Can I ask a question, just follow up on that? I mean, BIDS is the input data structure, right? And the specification are for things that are processed after, or the derivatives are for things that are processed, right? So is the question like, fMRI prep does a certain number of steps, other pipeline tools do other ones as well, that's fine. But I mean, this would be the question like, is, running a skull stripping program, should that have its own specification? That's really talking, BIDS is a data structure. And there are tools out there, AFNI, FSL, SPM, that do those individual steps, and then some of them are wrapped into pipelines like fMRI prep, like AFNI prop, et cetera. And I guess the question is how much should the specification go down individual program by program? Like, is skull stripping an individual step, is despiking an individual step?
So do you want to restate the question? So people on the video can't hear you, so maybe we'll restate your question.
I'll try to restate the question.
I might be able to restate it as part of the answer,
okay, yes,
which tends to work better. So I think maybe you're going to the far extreme other end of the spectrum where you're saying every single individual processing step should be its own BIDS app with its own provenance. Yeah. Okay. No, so I'm not proposing to go to that far extreme. I would probably introduce the concept at the other end of the spectrum, which might be something like you may have fMRI prep to do some fMRI processing, DMRI prep to do some diffusion data processing, and you then might have another BIDS app that uses the results of those two BIDS apps as its input. So you now have a BIDS app that's not operating on BIDS raw data. So the question is, how much is that kind of interdependency structure being considered, and does it need to be explicitly considered across pre-existing BEPS?
That was one of the kind of use cases that I think we had in mind when we first started thinking about BIDS derivatives, was the idea of like, having the reason you want it to be spit out in a machine readable form is so some other tool could read it in and maybe match things together. So that hasn't happened a lot because that, as he said, most of the BIDS apps take raw data and put out derivative data. But this is exactly why we wanted to go down the road of BIDS derivatives in the first place. And so I think that's, certainly that's a supported use case. We just haven't had good examples.
Yeah, so I suppose it's a question of at what point does that become a wider discussion? Because I'm certainly going down that road myself.
Yeah.
I'm just curious how many other people are thinking about it that way.
Right.
I think the BIDS derivatives discussion is partially that discussion, right? Because it'll help whoever wants to do these smaller modular things define
Yeah.
what are the outputs of the intermediate steps, right?
I kind of get the impression most people have thought about BIDS derivatives in the scope of sharing that data as opposed to performing further processing on that data. But that's just my personal impression.
I think those are kind of the two primary use cases, right? There's the inputs to the next step, and there's the something I can archive and share. I mean, they're related, but yeah, it's, yes. I mean, no, I don't have anything more to say, sorry.
Yeah, cool.
And one last point on this.
Can you talk to the
Thank you. And one last point on this from the new application spec front. So I know we haven't touched it in a while, but if I'm not mistaken, one thing we built into it is the ability to provide multiple BIDS datasets, including BIDS derivatives datasets to applets for this specific purpose of, okay, I had an app that just happened to, test 25 different types of skull stripping, and that was its own experiment. And then I'm passing in the derivative dataset I choose to this other pipeline, and so on and so forth. So again, there's really, in the prior version of the prior iteration of the BIDS app spec that wasn't really supported. It was a BIDS dataset, an analysis level, there's something, and an output directory, and then whatever other flags you wanted to specify. But now we're building in like explicit support for multiple input datasets, multiple input derivatives datasets, and again, a single output location. So there is movement towards there. Again, it's just a matter of us now like hardening tools so that spec can exist as opposed to be something that lives in a Google Doc. Does that kind of answer your question a little bit too?
Yeah, so I think in that case, it's probably something that I'd want to get more involved in myself.
Absolutely. I'll send you an email.
So I'm going to, before it scrolls away and I can't read it anymore, I want to just bring up this one comment online, which was asking about whether there's been any thought about developing sort of a communication protocol like PAX for DICOM in the context of BIDS. And so mentions, XNet doesn't really support BIDS, Flywheel does. Maybe a standard protocol would provide incentive. Others can say, I mean, I don't remember any discussion about this. And, to me, unless people are clamoring for it, it's not something that I would think we'd want to necessarily go at, in part because, I think we try, part of the philosophy has been to not try to reinvent wheels unless those wheels really need to be reinvented. And this seems like a reinvention that would start a fight with people. And my philosophy is generally we shouldn't be fighting with other people about, whose protocol is better. Others may have different opinions.
No, I completely agree. If you're having trouble transferring a BIDS data set, I mean, basically the way we do it with OpenNeuro is you have BIDS data set and you transfer it via DataLad using the Git protocol and Git Annex. And that's worked fine for us so far. That's like letting people transfer very large amounts of data or just the bits they need. I don't know what else people would want, but nobody has put forward a proposal at this point.
Okay, mine is not a question, it's just more a comment as a BID user. And my typical use case is that you manage your data analysis and just at the end, when you have to approach the problem of, let's say, data sharing, and then you have to encode your data. And so this is not a major payoff. And I believe that it might be important for the challenge of BIDS adoption, whether even, let's say, more and more software enable you if you have data encoded as BIDS. Because otherwise, okay, I can share data even if it is not perfect validated by BIDS, but if I have some added value because I can use a much more easier way the format. So yeah, this just because I believe for the community the adoption is a major challenge, and probably we have to think about this.
That was the original motivation behind BIDS apps, right? We said, how do we get people to use BIDS? Well, we want to say that, well, if you want to run FreeSurfer, you don't need to reformat your data into some new structure. You just point the container at your BIDS data set. Unfortunately, I think BIDS apps has stalled over the last few years. And so hopefully we can kind of, build some more momentum behind the next version. Because I completely agree with you that we need more tools that are very easy to run on BIDS data sets.
Thank you guys so much for putting this on and all the hard work on BIDS. I guess one question I had is, if we want things to be modular and community driven, it also seems like sometimes, even for, like, I imagine the busy steering committee members, to keep the larger landscape in view and how the modules fit together. So I was wondering if you guys had considered kind of a RFP model where, there's a roadmap and like there's like it's largely community driven, but like when you guys are having drinks at some point, you're like, oh, there's this empty box that we need to check that fills this need. Maybe someone should, and to try to kind of harness some of the latent energy that might be out there.
That would be great. We don't have any money to put behind an RFP.
Well, the reason it came up is because I was when what Franco was doing for CBIDS, I was like kind of thinking that's kind of like a model, and I was wondering whether that is anything behind the rest of the community. It sounds like not yet, potentially.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing to say is that I think we've certainly been trying to encourage people to go to, for example, Brain Initiative, which is, where Franco got his money for the BIDS connectivity project. They've been very supportive of standards development in general. So if somebody needs money to do a project, that would be a place to look at. But I totally agree that we should figure out. So for example, I think, BIDS apps 2.0 is a place where we really could use some people behind that. And so, having a model that basically says, hey, here's a project that we really, want people to get involved in. We can, we can't offer much, right? We can offer co-authorship on a paper and, your name in a Zenodo archive. But I agree that it would be good to maybe target the development in certain ways.
Thank you.
Hi, I have a couple of questions / comments, and I'll try to split them up a bit. So one comment is that as an outsider, becoming a developer for the BIDS app ecosystem is extremely onerous because it's a very large spec. There are a lot of programs to model after, and it can be a bit difficult to figure out where even to get started. And I could do things like bug Chris about it, but he's a busy person with lots of things to do. So I think, and it sounds like there's a consistent problem of people will start developing a BIDS app and then move on to other things or decide that it's a lot of work and they don't want to do it. So what's kind of the plan for putting stuff out there to make it as easy as possible for developers?
Do you want to speak to that first?
I think the plan has been, or the approach has been, at least for Python developers, is you load things up in PyBids and then just sort of pass them along, like query the thing and pass it along to the next, the tool that you're wrapping. There is essentially zero, for anybody who's like trying to work in C, they're going to have to just write it all themselves. And I did talk a little bit with Gong about it'd be nice to, if that is an interest, it'd be nice to have something kind of like libnifty for like a libbids, so that if FSL wants to support BIDS or AFNI or FreeSurfer, they can all go to a common source and expect that you're going to get comment or like get metadata out in the same way. I don't know. It's not like, some of it is just, it's not clear to me when there's a need for something or that would be cool. So I guess, I don't know. I also don't know that I could produce that myself. So, but yeah, I mean, that would be, I think, a good discussion to have is like, what can we do to make it easier to get in? And so like writing like cookie cutters and templates and things like that just make it as simple as possible.
Is what's needed, is it like a higher level API then? C libraries is one thing, but for, say, if you're developing in Python, higher level API, examples, documentation? Where does it hurt?
Kind of all of them, to be
Fair
blunt. Not just the C stuff, even the Python stuff. And again, it's because there's so much of all of it, which leads me to my second question of, because it's so complicated, which we all acknowledge, it seems that having very functional BIDS apps is kind of essential. One could not reasonably keep your data in BIDS unless you had a large suite of software tools to do it. So while I understand that there's impetus to not formally say, well, these are the BIDS apps we're promoting, this is where you should start, I actually think that's a pretty big barrier to entry for newcomers, because otherwise it's like, okay, what's a BIDS? And you go to the specification, and then you maybe go to PyBids, and it says, well, you need data lad. And then you're like, well, what's a data lad?
PyBids and data lad are entirely separated.
Yeah, I did one jump too many, sorry.
Okay.
That's my mistake. But it's true that a lot of these kind of data management tools do run on data lad. And it was more a point about there's so many things out there that you kind of have to familiarize yourself with and understand. I mean, it's true that you could just pip install as much as possible and then cross your fingers, but that's not necessarily doing good science or engineering. You should understand a little of what the tools are doing.
Yeah, I mean, so this sounds like also a documentation problem with like implementer guidance, which is sorely lacking. I agree.
Yeah.
My other question is,
Can you come to the mic?
Yeah.
I don't think the people online can hear you.
Follow-up, because I want to try.
I would like to say we are now 10 minutes over time, so no. Oh, we have 5 minutes left. I'm sorry, I'm lying.
So I can go?
Oh, yeah. I wasn't going to stop you. I was just going to let people know.
So we're talking about the barriers of entry to BIDS. What is the cost or the barriers of entry of any other alternative right now? I mean, because here we're talking about the choice between embracing BIDS and joining that effort of the community, or else. What is that else?
Or I just use the same lab scripts I've already been using. I mean, that's the alternative. If you want to share your data,
But
sure.
it also has an entry barrier the same way.
It does.
You just have your BI having that code in your lab or wherever, but you have to learn that.
Well, that's true, but in my lab, I can go to my PI and talk to him directly. I obviously can't just come directly to someone in BIDS. It's true that there's neurostars, but then you have to figure out how to formulate the question intelligently. And if you're new, that's hard.
I think that we, just since we only have a few minutes left, and I don't want, clearly there are differences of opinion in how to think about the cost of moving one's software from an existing approach to a new approach. And so I agree with Oscar that part of this is philosophical and it has to do with one actually buying into the philosophy. But I think we also hear what you're saying about the difficulties, especially if you're not coming from the Pythonic sort of world. And so I think maybe it would be actually useful for you're from the AFNI team?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm just a random lab programmer.
Okay. It would be useful for us for the steering group, I think, to have, because we really, one of the things we really want is to make it easy for people to make it, such that you have no reason not to write your software in a way that sort of takes in BIDS and spits out BIDS derivatives. And so whatever the challenges are to that happening, I think we'd like to hear that and work with the maintainers to figure out how to fix it. So maybe if you want to email me and then or one of the maintainers, and we can have a conversation and figure out how to bring this to the steering group to hear more about those pain points. I think that would be useful.
Sure.
Yeah, just offering a potential clarification, because I'm not sure if people are talking cross purposes here. I think there's a distinction between taking an existing functional script and converting it to work with your data in BIDS and converting your data to BIDS and having that work versus having a tool that will process any data that conforms to the BIDS specification, because that's actually a much grander task. And I'm wondering if you're getting intimidated by the specification because you're trying to solve problem 2 rather than problem 1.
I'm not sure I understood, sorry.
All right, clarification not achieved.
We can talk more. I know it's like 5.
I guess we got is there like one question left, the final one to wrap this up? Or not?
Cool.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you all.
But yeah, thank you all.